Huangnan Tibetan Autonomous Prefecture is located in the southeastern part of Qinghai Province on the border with Gansu. The area is famous as the birthplace of Tibetan Rigong art, and many artists live here. Since 2012, Tongren County in Huangnan has witnessed several self-immolations by Tibetans. In 2011, Pagpa, a 27-year-old native of Tongren County, returned to his home village after spending 6 years in Dharamsala, India. According to an investigation by Huangnan Intermediate People's Court, in June and July of 2012, he made 2 attempts to induce a monk named Jomagirb to commit self-immolation. Fortunately, Jomagirb's family found out and stopped it. In November 2012, Pagpa visited several families of people who had committed self-immolation. Under the pretext of offering condolences, he actually advocated Tibetan independence. He also played a leading role in an illegal demonstration outside the local police station, calling for Tibetan independence. Pagpa is one of 10 children from a very ordinary Tibetan family, no different from numerous others in Tongren County. When he was 7, Pagpa was sent away to a monastery to study Tibetan Buddhism. At the age of 13, he became a monk. However, he struggled to cope with the stricter rules at the monastery, and in 2005 he left. Still, the years of studying Buddhism had implanted an idea in his head he would make a pilgrimage to India. Eventually, he found himself at a school in Himachal Pradesh. The school was run by the so-called Tibetan government in exile and funded in part by its security bureau. He left the school and traveled to Dharamsala, where he studied at another school also run and financed by the Security Bureau of the so-called Tibetan government in exile. The school is actually a training ground where students from China, Bhutan, and the Indian state of Sikkim are indoctrinated with the Dalai Lama's teachings. Pagpa describes the school as being cut off from the outside world. When a Dalai clique marks a special occasion, the students would be sent into the streets to demonstrate and parade. Pagpa was exposed to the idea of Tibetan independence, and he was credulous. It was also at the school that Pagpa came into contact with Dangdrom Lata, a leading figure in the Radical Tibetan Youth Congress. On March 16, 2011, Pantog, a monk from Kirti Monastery in Nawa County in Sichuan Province, committed self-immolation. The Dalai clique reacted immediately with a big fanfare. They called Pantog a hero, fighting what they described as the tyranny of the Chinese government. They held religious services for him. Pagpa was in India at the time and witnessed it all.
다 가시고 뭐 드기올에 땅오마 고 드기올에 다 드기 따뜻하게 식당나도 쓰고 그다 나는 게 갑툭대 땅고르서 하늘로 타서 이상 예반으로 막 그다 지금이 상막이 화오리지 되고다 그런 게 화오도 인지선으로 산다다.
In September 2011, Pakpa returned home to Tongren County, but he maintained contact with the school in Dharamsala. He regularly sent them information on the local situation and photographs of self-immolations. He also came into contact with Gonzampo, another member of the Tibetan Youth Congress.
당이 스테팅고님 뭐힘노 강자인보가 능이 갑다인데 정말 그런 거 찾아가나 워시오고서 앉았다 뭐나 찾아지거든.
It was then that Pakpa began to search for possible candidates for self-immolation. Joma Gyab was a monk at a local monastery and someone he had known for many years. They met frequently after Pakpa returned from India. In June or July 2012, Pakpa began to put the idea of self-immolation into Joma Gyab's head.
로마스팅원이가 치 도움을 들살라 듣고 dimba 나오겠다. dimba 나오겠다. 들살라 언니가 딱 노아시만 삼카든 특네. 삼카네 치토 소티건 특네. 들건 들살라 언니가 갑다는 이렇게 서춘나는 사동 뒤 갑다대야. 들살라 딱 서춘나는 사동도 시고 오이크체들 화오링이 특샤라다 이렇게.
다니다 저기 다 손나 쳐주겠느래. 이때게 그게 다지야라 거기 다 손나 주 올라 다 팬키 아주라 팬키 오늘이야 다른 게 지금 알로라 지금 사가던도 있고 삼치는 중 도모들이
On November the 18th, 2012, Joma Gyab checked into a local hotel. He had brought petrol and cotton with him. That evening, he telephoned his cousin.
공모티 최치 타바그 윤드즈가 카프당다 가자 얌신드시구나 능무티 최 제드무스클라가니다 주 벤치 빙고가 야구데 덩그식즈베 나 손치대다 그게 나 다 다든 나다 나 죽도게야 다 야구드나 자마 치 하투 자마 스탐바지 다도 모습이고 또 무슨 치즈가 끼고 뭐 하면 초 마무고 저고 뭐 마무 다운 하게 메가 찍고 뜻이 아니고 뭐 근데다 그게 다 맞고도가 하면 초全面专注다가 너家整个花个家整个花个么你当也치라 때부터 참아 마통한다 죽은가 마모가 그거 칼로치수가 지나 땅에 마모하자 마통한다 철당이다 땅이 해대다 다 진짜시에니 쳐지고니 다신체 너무도 된다 말이지 나च्या고도 못하지 나च्या고도 쉬우니
다니다 준다서 꾸쳐지니 지금 조심력 자자만 들까 용서가 당지 장나래.
Finally, the cousin talked the Joma Gyab out of his plan.
단대가 랑게 타워실 거리 상당히 잡나. 다른 게 이렇게 소마탑이나 조금 마셔보는 거 있다. 나니 다 그런 거 리상거지나 조금 근데나 만족수 논체크 자와인수 그런 게다 자지나 제가 아주 그런 게 지속나라는 게 논체크 이게 스케줄가 그런 게 저기 그 식당나고 그 산우가 너무 좀 semeka 그 니와즈 마트 그런 게그 산우가 까메까 다지 종아제 있나라 다른 게 하마 위쪽이나 저거 너까요 저거 난 잡고 있어.
In June 2012, Pakpa joined Snow Tradition Cultural Service Group. Founded in January that year, it was an illegal organization that styled itself a body for the preservation of traditional Tibetan culture. It maintained close contact with the Tibetan independence forces outside China and promoted the idea of Tibetan independence. It also encouraged self-immolation. On November 7th, 2012, a man named Tomo killed himself in his home village in Tongren County. On the same day, Lobsang Sangye, a member of the Dalai clique and of the Tibetan government in exile, issued a statement. In it, he described the self-immolations as a sign of the deteriorating situation in Tibet. He called on the international community to put pressure on China. The following day, Doji Rinchen, leader of the Snow Tradition Cultural Service Group, turned up at Tomo's home and offered family a photograph of the Dalai Lama and 100 RMB as condolence money. On November 8th, a former monk named Jimpa killed himself in a square of Tongren County. The so-called Tibetan government in exile acted swiftly. It issued a statement saying that self-immolations were a cry from the Tibetan people. The Tibetan Youth Congress added its voice, saying that Tibetan independence was the only way to stop the self-immolations. The day after Jimpa killed himself, Doji Rinchen visited his home to offer condolences. On November 12th, 23-year-old Ninka and Ninjabam, a member of the Snow Tradition Cultural Service Group, killed themselves just 3 hours apart. On the same day, the Tibetan government in exile published on its website what it called an action plan and resolution passed at a special meeting of Tibetan people. It described the self-immolations as the ultimate form of protest by Tibetan people. In response, Pagpa led a demonstration in Tongren County, calling for Tibetan independence. Once again, Doji Rinchen, this time accompanied by Pagpa, turned up at homes of the dead to offer condolences. On November 14th, Lobsang Sangye from the Tibetan government in exile, speaking at a religious service, stated publicly that those who had committed self-immolation had died for the freedom of the Tibetan people. 2 days later, he said that they had given their lives for their beliefs, and he promised that the Tibetan government in exile would strive to have the Tibetan issue put on the international agenda in 2013. Voice of America and other Western media stepped up their coverage of the self-immolations. Immediately after the first suicides in Tongren County, Voice of America interviewed Jimpa. Not long afterwards, Jimpa killed himself by self-immolation. Jimpa, also known as Dukatashi, was from Tongren County. In 2002, he had gone to study Buddhism at Rongwu Temple, but had quit in 2011. The evening before he committed self-immolation, he and a monk named Jigme Tenzing had together watched the Voice of America Tibetan language program on Tibet.
Yina jurungni semur khatano kara or kerepundani ni khatano tanya kharkok tito ajarim buche sangam molom jekono ta kharkok tito lobsang sangi tiksek tok tito tra manga giching dong tok.
The Voice of America's Tibetan Service program covered 2 cases of self-immolation that had taken place in Tongren County on November 4th and 7th, 2012. It concluded that the deaths were brought about by Chinese government policy. The program quoted the Dalai Lama as saying that the situation in Tibetan areas in the territory was clearly worsening and that more harshly the Chinese government dealt with the Tibetan people, the stronger was the will of the Tibetan people to resist. Lobsang Sangye was also featured, encouraging the Tibetan people not to lose hope. A caption appeared on screen, praying for the people who died for the Tibetan cause. Jigme Tenzing has revealed that Jimpa was disappointed by life outside the monastery. He had lower social status and failures in his love life. After watching the Voice of America program, he had confessed that his life was meaningless and he saw self-immolation as a way of becoming famous. He even asked Jigme Tenzing to take photographs of him setting fire to himself and made him promise to send pictures to India. The next day, November the 8th, 2012, Jinpa committed self-immolation in a square of the county. Jigme Tenzing took 2 photographs with his mobile phone and made up posters with the slogan, "Independence for Tibet." On hearing news of Jinpa's death, Pagpa rushed back home for the funeral. "Those who commit self-immolation are glorious," he said to Jinpa's family. "They did it for the freedom and happiness of the Tibetan people." He had already received photographs of Jinpa's self-immolation, and these he forwarded to a member of the Tibetan Youth Congress outside China. 51-year-old Nam Kasham had also taken pictures of Jinpa's death and has sent them to a contact in India, known simply as Tibetan woman.
金巴的那个照片有的时候在我给他发的时候在他这样说的，这个照片我不需要，这个我早就有了，在你其他的有事，再给我发一下。
Tibetan woman's real name is Tsering Wamo, a 44-year-old native of Hainan Tibetan Autonomous Prefecture in Qinghai. She had left China illegally in 1998 and gone to India, where she worked as a translator for the Dalai Click's website. Later, she joined Contacts Online, a pro-Dalai Click organization, and is now its number 2.
那个张佳妮那个就是吧，她是海南的时候，她在印度以来，她在那打工，她的老公在国外，她在那家打工治病的时候，在她的病还是病不轻，重得很。 在一边打工一边治病的时候，在我那时候被问了，你叫什么名字？你是干什么的？我这样问了吗？你不需要说这些。
An investigation has revealed that Tsering Wamo belonged to a secret organization jointly sponsored by the United States International Broadcasting Bureau and Sundrop Consulting Company, registered under the name of Tupton Sundrop. The Voice of America is supported by the International Broadcasting Bureau, while Tupton Sundrop is one of the Dalai Lama's most trusted people. The name of the organization in Tibetan means contacts. A document revealed its mission, using the internet to work on young people inside China so that they accept our beliefs and support the cause of Tibetan independence. In 2009, this organization had a new sponsor, the National Endowment for Democracy, which gives it $50,000 every year. Following the first self-immolations in China's Tibetan areas, this organization became very active on the internet in encouraging more. Young Gabja is a 24-year-old tanka artist from Longwu Township in Tongren County. He too was an online friend of the so-called Tibetan woman. Young Gabja operated an online community called Tibetan Freedom Community, and through it he maintained close contacts with Tibetan women. After self-immolation in Huangnan, he sent many photographs and information related to the victims to Contacts Online. Tibetan woman was one of several aliases used by Tsering Wamo. In June 2012, using the name Droma, she initiated contact via the internet with a monk from Qinghai named Tupton Powden, who was temporarily in Beijing. She told him that it was not against the Buddhist no-killing belief if Tibetan Buddhists committed self-immolation. It was not a breach of Buddhist doctrine. She added that it took courage to do it, but it needed preparation. It should not be done at random. She also sent him photographs of self-immolations. Slowly, Tupton Powden was convinced that he too should commit self-immolation. However, he was stopped at the last moment by his friends. For a long time, the Tibetan independence forces have been using the internet to urge Tibetan people to commit self-immolations. Lamu Gyeb, a member of the Tibetan Congress on Exile, part of the Dalai Click, even published guidelines on how to do it. The book provides details on when, where, and how to commit self-immolation.
나는 또 저한테라 다른 어연들이나 다른 미소콘 어떤 kin데 다 그거잖아 가리 손당들이 다 돈진 대다 그 디노지니 당하는 게 전화랑 엄마 시그 셈반이나 그 조리 오야스이나 시그 그 조가 단데 데이터 샤슈니나 당엄마 그 상모당난도 그 특허사를 삼거 특허사를 삼거 당원이나 그 기신이 남지라 어떤데 니 대ten도 모두 토는 디토니 녀르이나 근데 처리서 마땅하달리 어떤 디토니 그녀원달는데 그 개체지도 영영도 합성한 거는
영 아는 거밖에 아시안 구이적당 아시안 속에서나 들아 영 속초거든 영 먹여와인 다 존재랑 속체 마도 담치고 지력 같은 내시나 다 하체 먼저는 잠보 그거 처만게 오는 잠보 레 먹여와리 등을 진지보다 등을 좀 아마 또 되어요 말 대인도나다 그 지와지 많이 지나라 다른 거 리머기 진지보다 다 등을 좀 줘. 다 혼주지나다 네 다치 주축을 합시다 그다 네 나송스마스 그 등을 손 디문용 주나 말도 다리 머기와리 등 지워 디완 정도도 받고 요는 말
自焚这个本来就不对，生命是第一位的，没有了生命，那无从谈起，什么都没有了。因为我们说是你自杀也不对，你挑动他人那个死亡也更加不对。
Pagpa finally came to the realization that committing self-immolation was against Buddhist teachings.
상집 체정나 르글미죠 그 녀창막 송건가 나와지나 그나 로이미미 잔임세 고가 잔입 끼미니까 저는 고거토미니까 쇼타미 그 녀스미니까 디노는 녀스미니는 랑게스미니까 랑게스나 티와 납자 랑게랑게 수고하다 좋고 랑게랑게 납자 티와 납자 랑게랑게 세타나 티와 납자 수고하다 좋고 그거는 나 삼지 답아요 그
After 6 years away, Pagpa said he felt life back home was better than the life in Dharamsala.
혼자씩 교가 달름사라. 사망라게씩 다 교가. 코리안들씩 참시하다 뭐는 그 교원으로리 매번으로리. 다 내오나 그 코리아 तर상마라. 다 망치셔서 그런 거 머릭삼이 딱한 게 오늘이다. 그런 거 머릭 들고 삼이. 디체다 칼레 망아도 잡니다. 단들고 디체다 그런 거 돌지바 이거 땅에 그 캠상과 근데 딱한 저렇게 너네 되나 서고너리 딱가서나라 다른 거 거의 그때 뭐 거의 체포도 메거다 그게 장사가 되나단 너네 되나는 게 그게 장탑고 근데 때로는 가이네 다 그 라건으로라 욕 다가 빠땅 갔다 오든지 그런 거 아마나 나바리 다 가무지 요나 랑가 하마다 뉴리 다 약군들 시데나 다시 그러고
On February the 8th, 2013, the Intermediate People's Court of Huangnan Tibetan Autonomous Prefecture gave verdict on Pagpa's case. He was found guilty of intentional homicide by inciting and encouraging people to commit self-immolation, of fomenting national division by chanting Tibetan independence slogans in illegal demonstrations, and of spreading the idea of Tibetan independence. In view of the fact that his murder attempt was unsuccessful, the court advocated a lenient sentence.
对高人普化犯故意杀人罪，判处有期徒刑9年；犯煽动分裂国家罪，判处有期徒刑5年；剥夺政治权利2年；决定执行有期徒刑13年；剥夺政治权利2年。
Qinghai police are currently processing the cases against Namkasham and Ingabja, key figures in the illegal Snow Tradition Cultural Service group. They're charged with spreading information on self-immolation and making and distributing pamphlets advocating Tibetan independence.